Thank you so much. I'm Adrian Garcia. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of this committee, thank you to my neighbor and my senator, Senator Garcia. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill from a perspective of local law enforcement executive of one of the most culturally rich and diverse counties in Texas. As the sheriff of Harris County, the largest in Texas and the third largest in America. And as you know, I and all other sheriffs across this great state are elected by the people in our counties. And we offer ourselves and our ideas to our constituents on what may be our approach to enhance public safety in our communities. In that regard, I hope that you will agree that local law enforcement should have the flexibility to develop appropriate strategy and policy for their respective communities. Some of my colleagues may believe they need such a law for their jurisdiction, while others would like to have flexibility. To that end, local law enforcement leaders like sheriffs are actively engaged in their communities, working every day to keep their communities safe. As local law enforcement leaders, we understand what we need to do to better help crime victims, to do what it takes to identify criminal activity, to do what it takes to cultivate those key witnesses that will lead to stronger prosecutions and stiffer sentences, to do what it takes to get all people to be an extension of our efforts to keep the community safe. This bill appears to diminish the local control that's needed in deciding policing strategies, policies, and laws to make our communities safer. In response to previous proposals made in the 82nd legislative session, the TML asserted that mandates such as those provided in this bill are unnecessary and in contrast to the idea that government closest to the people is best. The proposed legislation appears to present a solution that is in search of a problem. This legislation implies that sanctuary is given to certain people and by certain communities, and that there are no consequences for those people. I submit that sheriffs do all we can to hold those people we arrest, especially the most dangerous and most violent, accountable in all respects in our counties. I've worked closely with our federal partners to ensure that they have access to do their important work as it relates to immigration enforcement. This approach has been practical, cost-effective, but I've had the flexibility to devise our approach as I thought best given my resources and my community. Our approach has worked well. As Ferguson remains in the headlines, it reminds us that the bond between law enforcement and our communities is fragile. And in recent months, we have seen the strength of that bond tested like never before. For that reason, I'm concerned about the unintended consequences that this bill could have on my deputies and our ability to stay true to being the entity that good people should be closest to and not the entity to avoid. In order to meet our goal of keeping the community safe, I need all people with critical information to be willing to come forward and share with my deputies that information. I'm concerned that this bill will keep or push people and their information further into the shadows, which harms public safety. I'm concerned that although the bill speaks to an officer's ability to do criminal investigations, I want to remind us that a traffic stop is a criminal investigation until a patrolman decides otherwise. As a result, this law has a potential of prohibiting me from setting policy that would protect my deputies from allegations of racial profiling. After all, immigrants do come in all shades and colors. As a result, this bill has me concerned about how this would impact my response times to urgent and emergency calls. With my call for service volume growing every day, this bill has me concerned about the possible impact it would have on my budget and available resources, since there is no provision in this bill for how a patrolman will deal with a person who may not satisfy their questions, and whether our local taxpayers will be reimbursed for us doing more of the federal government's work. Further, I want and need all people to be active participants in protecting our community, regardless of what their immigration status may be. Such a law would further intimidate witnesses and victims of crime and risk the possibility that it would negatively impact legal residents and recently sworn Americans. We're in a time when we need everyone's help in our collective efforts against transnational gangs, cartels, human traffickers, and smugglers. Lastly, the business community in Harris County, such as the Greater Houston Partnership, has time and time again called for broad-based immigration reform that would serve us all well. What our business leaders support would strengthen our economy and bring people out of the shadows and as a result, strengthen public safety. This bill runs the risk of working against measures that are good for business and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Members, questions for Senator Garcia? Thank you, Sheriff, first of all, for coming down. And I just wanted to clarify a point on the 287G program. I think you heard some of the comments. You've been in the room. Is Harris County still under the agreement with the Justice Department on 287G?
It is.
So it's at that point during booking that the immigration status is inquired about.
That's correct. And remember that a great majority of the cases that come before us are serious crimes. And so those people get screened all effectively in the jail, which is the most cost-effective and practical way to apply it.
So do you think that in itself is an effective tool, or do you think we need to be doing more now, asking the officers to do this on the street?
Sheriff Wiles alluded to it, and I will reiterate that we're in the information business. We need people to come forward with information. If we start to apply this out in the field, it will be difficult to supervise. It'll be difficult to, as it was asked about a road policeman, to determine whether we're pushing witnesses and victims away. So in the jail has been a very, very effective way to do it, and I think we're meeting our obligation to the community.
So even for cities that don't have an agreement under 287G, they may have another agreement which is called Secured Communities. Could you just tell my colleagues what that is and how cities use that, and it's another tool that's available?
It's another tool that's available, and essentially now when all fingerprints are taken, they go into the national database system. They run through all the respective databases, and including ISIS. And so if someone has a warrant, has criminal history, has some issue that would catch ISIS, Department of Homeland Security's attention, those agencies would be notified. There'll be conversations about having those persons detained while they dispatch resources to them to take custody of that person. But that network of digital fingerprints is something that can support all agencies across Texas.
And if a city didn't have an agreement with the Justice Department on 287G and couldn't afford to get a big fancy computer to do that, is this a question of inquiry that usually it's someone that's assigned to the case from the prosecutor's attorney would probably inquire about immigration status?
Yes. For years, Harris County has always asked the question, are you a U.S. citizen or not? We've asked that for at least the 30-some-odd years I've been in the business. So that question has always been asked as a part of our booking and charging process.
At booking. Just want to
Yes.
make clear, it's at booking.
That's right. It's always at the time we're filing charges.
So for people that are concerned that we need to know the status of an immigrant when they're jailed, most jails do that already, right?
I can't speak for others, but I know that we do it in Harris County,
Right.
largest county in Texas.
So if you had to, how much money did you spend in training the officers that do the current booking process? I know that there's also an immigration officer in the jail, is there not?
Correct. We have 8 detention officers, 1 deputy assigned to our 287G agreements. That cost, because that's all they do, is just over $1 million.
It's about $1 million, and that's just for those officers doing it there now. So if you had to, under this bill, if it became law, train every single one of your deputies to do what those 8 or 10 are doing now, that it cost you $1 million, about how much would that cost?
I mean, it is, for my agency, it would be millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, without a doubt, in order to be compliant with the law, which I would want to do if the law passes. I'd have to spend overtime to get those deputies into the academy, to get them trained up as quickly as we possibly could. And then I can't even begin to think about all the time we would spend building the curriculum and what all that would cost to move that training. But without a doubt, it would cost me a lot more money than I've got right now.
Okay. And that one final question, is there any crime that you're aware of in the penal code that requires one of the elements to be knowing the immigration status of the person? I mean, do you all mind if someone shoots, you're just interested in who the shooter is and who the victim is?
No, ma'am. No, we want to catch whoever pulled the trigger.
Period. You
Period.
don't care what sex, what race, what
Nope.
immigration status, where they came from.
Nope.
If they're the perpetrator, you want to go out and get them.
If they're the bad guy, they're the bad guy, and As I typically say, we want to hook them and give them to our DA so she can fry them.
Hook them and fry them. Now, see, Mr. Chairman, that's language I understand.
I'll work on that, Senator Garcia. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's, since you're hooking and frying it, we want you to get back to doing that. Thank you so much for coming today.
I got a big pan at home.
Members' questions for Sheriff Garcia? Thank you, Sheriff,
Thank you.
for joining us today.